Hello. Today we're going to be talking about Composable Digital Experience Enterprise. Can't even pronounce it. It's just so mouthful. But this is really cool topic. We're talking about how we get this Composable Digital Experience Enterprise going. I mean, it's a topic that we all know now. It's where we want to be. The starting point, though, there are some discussions. Where do we start? For some, it can be XM Cloud and the whole thing, the whole implementation. For others, more conservative organizations, it could be something smaller. And I actually represent one of those organizations. We are not yet comfortable to go with full implementation of XM Cloud, but getting into Composable definitely could bring benefits for us. So question becomes is how do we start on Composable journey and without really affecting our current processes and our company's culture. And so one way to do it is to start small. Introduce Sitecore CDP Personalize along with our current xDB and xConnect that we currently have in-house on top of XP platform. So my name is, My name is Boris Bratsky. I am AVP of Sitecore Product at Verisk. Verisk is not a partner. We are Sitecore client. And I've been Sitecore MVP for 5 years, and I've been doing Sitecore since 2009, when I got my first 6.3 certification. I've been doing software development for the past 20 years, and I live near Baltimore, Maryland. Please visit my website, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Now, a little bit of Verisk. Verisk is, Verisk provides expert data-driven analytics insights that help businesses, people, and societies become stronger, more resilient, and sustainable. So we are essentially a risk assessment company. We analyze data, and we provide data analysis to our insurance partners. Today we're going to be talking about Composable DXP and data and strategy. It is a new way of truly looking at how we're going to interact with our systems. And it's no longer application development. We need to start thinking in different terms. And we need to start applying composable thinking when we solve our DX solutions now. It's important to really look at data, modern data architecture. As we look at composable transformation, it is less about application, a lot more about data, and it goes beyond just simple ETL. Then we're going to look at Sitecore CDP and Personalize it, how it can play a role in this composable journey. We're going to look at what Sitecore CDP Personalize API has, like services and tools. And then we're going to look at a practical implementation of Sitecore CDP with our xConnect application. Truly, to really understand what we are doing here, we need to look at this is an amazing slide. So just last year during symposium, Dave Flanagan said that future is composable. It was last year. Fast forward to today, we are no longer talking about composable future. We are in that reality. We are moving clients to composable, and Sitecore I've heard like hundreds of clients that have migrated to composable architecture. So it's a reality that we have to adapt to. And if we look at really what composable architecture is, and I've been always puzzled by what is the true definition of composable architecture. And it is really, to understand it, we need to see what's the building block of composable architecture. In my opinion, it's the package business capability. That's kind of like a Lego from which we build our applications. And package business capability is not an API, but like API, it designed to abstract our functionality and capabilities. And from package business capabilities, we can actually start building our composable architecture. Very similarly how from APIs, we develop SOA architecture or microservice architecture. So there are a lot of similarity between two, but the major difference between package business capability and API API is a developer-oriented concept. Developers take APIs and build applications from them, where package business capability is aimed at business. It aimed to solve specific business problems. So collection of this package business capabilities is that composable architecture that we're trying to achieve. Now, if we look at landscape of our kind of architecture today. So on the left side, we have our monolith application. It is typical multi-tier application. We have a lot of functionality built in. It's typically deployed together. We have typically one database. It typically takes a long time to truly create this monolith application, where on the right side, we are really agile. We have domain-oriented components. And to get to that, we need to start thinking about strategy, how these components would help us solve specific business needs. We are no longer looking at specific application that we need to use or whether we need to Helix architecture or not. We're looking at strategy as to what this specific component would need to help us solve. And then we also have data, how these components are connected together. Because if we are not connected, if these components are not connected together, we're going to have siloed data. So we need to solve for strategy and data as part of this new composable architecture. And if we look at strategy, this is the one that really we have to truly start applying new thinking. So on the left side, we have our typical modern strategy, where we have strategy team comes in, spends maybe 3-4 months doing like FED, creative, content, outcome strategy. Then they package all of that and pass it over to technology team, and then somewhere maybe 6-8 months, 10 months later, we get our platform implemented. And so this is the typical duration of the project, a year-long project where strategy pretty much disconnected from implementation. And at any point, if you need to make a change to your strategy when strategy was completed, it is often too late, and we have to wait for another cycle. Where on this composable domain-driven strategy, it's very different. Now we are solving for specific domain. It could be a customer domain, or it could be a loyalty domain. But we are solving that small domain that and to solve it, we don't need to do any really application architecture. We just need to look at business outcomes, and we need to look at how to connect these business outcomes with our enterprise. So we're talking about strategy, new way of thinking about strategy. And on the data side, we have even more complexity. Now we are talking about historical data, operational data. We have data latency concerns, like do we do batch, do we do real time, or do we do streaming? And then we have consumers, data consumers, and there are a lot more of them. And on data consumer side, we have analytics data consumers that help us understand trends that or decision that we need to apply to our organization. And then we have application integrations. We might have multiple applications that need our data. And with that, we need to start thinking about how this data really applies. And so data latency is extremely important consideration, where we might have two different capabilities on different clouds that needs to share data between each other. Or we need to think about scalability, we need to think about cost, we need to think about fault tolerance. What if one of the package business capabilities goes down? What happens to our enterprise? We need to look at data governance and data security and privacy, data lineage, where data is coming from, where data is going, who has access to our data. We need to look at data connectivity, mapping, and transformation. So data becomes first-class citizen, and data really is one of the most important things after strategy that we need to address, data integration. So if we look at strategies that really are modern today, strategies that we have today, there are really 3 important components that we need to kind of think about. First is, how do we modernize our data stack? Like, we want to have we want to adopt scalable infrastructure. It needs to scale vertically, horizontally. It needs to it needs to scale in a way where we have automation. So we don't want to be a technology team shouldn't be a bottleneck in this process. We should have a self-service data platform. On the Connect side, we want to break down silos. As we go into composable architecture, we're going to end up having multiple package business capabilities, which will have its own data store. And not solving for that, we're going to end up having data silos, which we really want to avoid. And we need to establish data governance. Now we need to know when these components are connected, where data is, how it's streaming. We almost have every month we almost have a new regulation around data privacy and security. We have laws in California, in Europe. They're all different, but we need to start thinking about data governance as a first-class citizen of our enterprise. And obviously, we want to innovate. We want to encourage data-driven decision-making, and we want to really explore these new capabilities such as machine learning, AI, and for that to happen, we need to have this modern data architecture created. And so if we look at really possible architectures that currently are available, data mesh is one of the most popular ones. Data mesh is truly been around since 2019. Back in 2019, this was just a concept. When I looked at data mesh in 2000s, there were no tools, no really easy ways to implement it. It was great architecture, but not enough capabilities to do it. Now, fast forward to today, we have number of tools from pretty much every single cloud provider that designed to solve this specific architecture. And if we look at data mesh, there are 4 principles here. Data as a product. And this is one of the most important principles of data mesh. And the idea of data as a product is like in the development. In my days, I was creating, for example, a C# class. I would create an interface. That interface would have properties that relevant to me. I would not include every single property that I have. I'll just include things that matters to me. And same applies to data. We want to include only data that is relevant. We want to monetize our data and not just to have a database with like 3,000 fields that essentially no one knows what they do and where they are and what they are for. So data is a product, number 1. Software self-service data platform, that's another one. We want to be able to create data products at any time without technology team being a bottleneck. We want to be domain-oriented, meaning that we don't want to have all data in one place. We want to focus on specific domains in our organization and have teams that own that specific domain. We want to look at federated governance as a first-class citizen of our data architecture. We want to know where data is coming from, who owns data, where data is going. And this is all requires truly a new set of tools. So in this presentation, I'm going to look at tools provided by Azure. Now, AWS, Google, they all have their own tools designed to solve that specific problem. So if we look at the tools we have, so this is Azure Synapse from Microsoft, along with Purview. They are designed to address data mesh concerns. The way it works is like this. We have data sources. For example, xConnect becomes our data source. From xConnect, we ingest data into our data lake. Now, this ingestion can be real-time or batch. And once we have data in our data lake storage, we can use number of tools provided by Microsoft to analyze and make data product from that data. And it could be serverless SQL pool, which for pennies will allow you to normalize large amounts of thousands of records, not small amounts of data, but at very low cost. You can go to dedicated SQL pool to analyze larger amounts of data, or you can go to Spark to pretty much do analysis on petabytes of data. And that all gets analyzed through machine learning, through AI, and that becomes our data product. That data product then can be consumed by devices, domains, and people. And this represents kind of data domain, but then you might have multiple domains like that in your organization, where Azure Purview would perform governance capabilities. Now, this is actually yesterday now. As of this year, Microsoft have released a new product. It's called Microsoft Fabric. So this is a brand new tool. It's still based on the functionalities of Synapse. The components are very similar. Implementation is quite similar too. The Microsoft calls it OneDrive for your enterprise data. Why this tool is important? Now, up until now, if you wanted to analyze your data, you would need to move your data from AWS, like in case of Sitecore CDP and Personalize. We know that Sitecore CDP and Personalize host data in S3 buckets. So before in Synapse, we would have needed to move data to Microsoft to do your analysis. Now you can create a pointer to your data in S3 bucket and do your analysis, do your data warehousing, do your data engineering, data factory, data science, all in one place without ever moving the data. So these tools appearing like one by one, but in the past 2 years, we had 3 iterations of these different tools. So there's a lot going on the data side, and it's great for us because composable architecture requires data integration. So now let's look at path to composable and where it starts. So I don't know how many of you have embarked on composable architecture. I know Proficient, Avanade, they do big implementations. They do it all at once. But maybe other partners are more conservative and not necessarily ready to apply that, kind of apply it all at once. So composable architecture can start with small. We can start applying Sitecore CDP Personalize on top of our XP platform, and we're gonna get quite a bit out of it. First, we're gonna get personalization simplified. It's a different level of personalization. It is truly oriented at marketers to do more, and it provides us with true CDP platform. Even though xConnect can be looked at CDP platform, but in reality, xConnect was never designed to be a CDP. It can store personal data, but it was never designed to be a CDP platform, where Sitecore CDP is a real CDP platform. It allows for low-code capabilities, so we can integrate Sitecore CDP Personalize with our systems in a low-code way, and there are a lot of connectivities now available through Sitecore Connect over Kato. It allows for decision tree and audience workflows, where we can create relatively complex workflows that can help us do quite a bit with our personalization. And it is truly omni-channel personalization. So we can inject personalization routines on pretty much any asset we have, mobile apps, kiosks, and etc. So there are a lot of advantages to really go with Sitecore CDP Personalize on top of your existing XP platform if you're not ready for the full-blown transformation. And so one way to start, I call it light integration, is where we just use Engage SDK. We use Sitecore Personalize without CDP, and we use Engage SDK and connect functionality of Sitecore Personalize to get data in. It's going to be obviously transactional data, and then we can personalize visitor interactions and do implicit personalization, and we can do visitor reporting. So this doesn't account for our data that we might have in our xConnect, but it's a super easy way to start. You can procure a license today and have your personalization done tonight. So this is how easy it is. But we are interested in the second case where we can do a lot more. So now we have our data in xDB, and we can use all these APIs, like Batch API for inbound data, getting data from external systems. We can use data like export service to save data to external systems, outbound connectivity. We can use REST API for inbound and outbound real-time integrations. We can use Engage SDK to embed personalization on our site and start capturing events. And we can use Sitecore Connect to actually push data from Sitecore CDP across the entire ecosystem, or push and pull data. In this case, data persistence is transactional, and we can do data replication or synchronization. So we can hydrate Sitecore CDP with our custom data and then do personalization based on that. And capabilities here are quite a bit quite a few more. We can do visitor and customer cross-platform personalization. We can do visitor customer event tracking and visitor customer event reporting. So quite powerful. Well, here's a scenario that we're going to do. We're going to personalize content on all touch points using data from xConnect. And that's really the goal, is to get data from our xConnect system and start doing personalization on our XP site, or any for that matter. Now, before we start, we need to start looking at this batch-based and real-time components. And it's extremely important because truly in Sitecore's, in this composable architecture, there's no real time. It's not like we have monolith application where we can connect our database, get data out, and work with the data. Here we deal with actually near real time, and it can be quite significant. It can be seconds, it can be milliseconds, and this is the thing that we need to understand when we integrate multiple components, is what that latency is. Okay, and at what point I need to actually cache my data near the source if latency is not acceptable. That's a very important question that we're going to be asking ourselves when we develop composable architecture. And so if we look at really possible implementation of composable architecture, we can use Sitecore CDP as data product. And that's one way to do it. This is truly an easiest way to implement integration between Sitecore XP and Sitecore CDP Personalize. Now, the caveat is, and I was told by Sitecore that this integration, that Sitecore Connect integration, will be launching in 3 weeks. So it is Workato recipe that will connect two systems. Once it's done, you can build this really in no time, so there will be no need for any like POC, because it's going to be straightforward, simple, and native. But that's not always possible for a few reasons. First, you might already have your data product infrastructure. You might have customer data somewhere in your data lake, or you might have Azure Synapse procured, and you might have knowledge of how to use Azure or AWS ETL capabilities. So in that case, you might actually want to go with something like that. It looks a lot more complex, but in reality, to build this, you would probably need a week or two at most. It's a very low code to no code implementation. But the idea here is this. You have your Sitecore XP. You will connect to Sitecore XP through OData interface, get data, cache it, transform it, save it in the data lake, and then you will push this data to Sitecore CDP Personalize, and then you will capture data from Sitecore CDP Personalize back into your customer data lake. So that creates this data product that is compatible for more complex use cases. Advantage of this approach: first, it showcased that Sitecore is truly composable. So we were able to utilize CDP in a composable way, where we use instead of Sitecore Connect, we use our own implementation. And second, this is where we have granular control over our data. We have data governance implemented in a way that is could be a lot more robust than what CDP might allow. So two ways to show. Now, in this presentation, I'll show how to implement this way. So let's look at really how it might work. So first we need, as I described, we need to connect, we need to cache data, we need to transform data, and then we need to productize the data. So this is typical Azure Synapse pipeline. We have, as you can see here, we only have one function that we need to create. It's called prep data. Everything else is out of the box, no code. And first we construct OData query through which we ask to produce data for a specific period of time. So here we are saying, give me data for the previous day. Then we need to actually convert a data file into JSON. Unfortunately, it's a limitation of Microsoft where we cannot process complex objects. So at some point they might fix it, but as of this moment, we cannot just process complex objects, and events in Sitecore interactions are complex objects. So that's the limitation. Other than that, this is no code implementation. And so here's an example of what we're essentially going to achieve here. This is typical event. We have a header of this event, which is consistent. It's static, so it's easy to process. But the events themselves, if you look here, they are really depend on what you have, what users are clicking on, how users interact with your website. And so what we want to do is what you see on the right side. We want to normalize it. Obviously, in your production system, you're not going to use SQL. You're probably going to use NoSQL. So you're not going to need to normalize it like that. But this is just an example of what you can do with the tool without actually writing any code. So essentially, the logic happens through the web interface. This is where you actually push your different events. You can identify events through split condition, and then you store events where you want to store them. This is absolutely no code implementation, super easy to do, but this is a batch process. Now, once you have your data stored, then you can create your external table, and you can query your data using SQL notations. In this case, I use serverless pool, which means that I can probably process thousands of records, but when a number of records grows, it becomes more difficult, and you would need to probably go with more robust option, maybe dedicated SQL pool or even other options. And once your data has been normalized, maybe a view created, you can start actually doing, you can tag your data, create data product, and this is a per view where we can say this is our data product, and you can do schema classifications. You can do all this governance stuff. So it has powerful options, and this is how the product would look like. You might end up having multiple data products here, but it's so easy to find what you're looking for. It is truly monetizing your data and productizing your data. You can also see in Purview where data is coming from and where it's going. So just a lot of capabilities that truly are powerful and needed when you build data governance nowadays. So next, we're going to look at how to connect to Sitecore CDP to push this data into Sitecore CDP Personalize. Again, this is a little bit more complicated. It is a three-step process. I don't know how many looked at this API, but it is a bit more complicated, but it can still be done through automation. The idea here is we create an import file. We capture metadata for that file. We submit authentication request to batch API. We get a URL back, and we then put file into that URL. Straightforward. And it's a sync process. The results are not right away available, so you have to kind of wait for maybe 15, 20 minutes to know that your input was successful. And so the process kind of looks like that, where we have a lot more steps, obviously, because it's more complex. And we have three Azure functions here that we need to develop. They are small, maybe 15, 20 lines of code in each, but there are some development involved. And there's a curious problem as far as like sending data to or putting data into Sitecore CDP. Apparently, there's a limitation, or I would say a bug on Microsoft side or Microsoft REST clients where you can't really pass content MD5 to AWS S3 buckets. So you can't really use Microsoft JSON or REST client, but you can use Node.js client. So most of these functions, the first two functions are .NET based, where the last one, complete CDP export, is Node.js based because of that limitation. It's weird, but I was told that Sitecore CDP team is trying to reduce that or remove that type of security, replace it with a more modern way of doing it. So hopefully it'll happen soon. But even now, you can still build this in a matter of days and start pushing data to Sitecore CDP Personalize. But once you push data to Sitecore CDP Personalize, you don't really know what happened to the data. You have to check the status of that submission. And here you can build this small logic app, which will actually, you see it on the right side, which will actually, the last step in this process, this web QoS step, that step calls this logic app. And this logic app, what it does, it just calls Sitecore CDP server every 5 minutes or whatever period of time and checks if submission was received. And then it outputs the results into Teams, or it can be anything else. But it's not necessary because submission can take from 5 minutes to hours. And I've seen in some cases it can be like 15 hours. So you need something like that to check on your input. But this is batch process. So this should be, data latency should be considered, and there are other ways to do it. Obviously, there is real-time way through REST API. Now, once data is sent into Sitecore CDP Personalize, we can actually check that submission was successful. So this is just to showcase that I was able to push my data successfully. And now I start working on my personalization routines. So in this example, I'm saying that if count page views is more than 55, that's just arbitrary number. If visits are more than 55, for example, I want users to see specific content. And so in this case, I use audience mapping. I don't know how it's called. I think that's what it's called. And or I can go and create decision tree where I can say if it is top visitor and is high value customer, then I can show offer table where I can do like things like it's quite small, I think. Let me see if I can. So I can do things like that as well. So I can do programmables to write specific small pieces of code that will help me define logic for my decision tree implementation. And once it's done, I can do decision tree here. I can say if is high value customer and is top visitor equals to true, I can show specific code to my end user. And really, this is kind of how you can build your personalization routines. Now, I don't think we can do component level personalization in Personalize just yet. So this is more like a section personalization. So there are still limitations. It's not yet mapped one-to-one to your Sitecore xConnect personalization implementation. So if you're looking at applying this strategy, migration strategy, you probably want to consider running xConnect in parallel until entire personalization routines are replaced. But in general, you can do quite a bit more. But it's a different type of personalization, so we have to be very careful how we do that stuff. And so once I've done my table, I can display information in this way. So web experiences are very straightforward, very simple. We just choose one of the predefined experiences, and we can display this information in no time. So implementation like that, you can assemble in a matter of weeks, and I would say 2 weeks, you can start with implementation like that. So that's all I have. Thank you to our sponsors, obviously. But that's all I have. Any questions or comments?
How long do you use the data for? Like we have a 5 years and they're finally ready to go. Do you have all 5 years of the data? You know, it'll take a long time.
Yeah, if you have five years of data, it's going to take time. But what I've seen is actually that's probably the only way to get data out. So you would write iteration tool, like you'll say from this data, because you can get all the data. It's a data interface. It does pagination, but I've seen when it gets to like 100 pages, it just breaks. It's called Sitecore, so you kind of have to.
The earlier the better.
Yeah.
So when you push data into CDP, you're mapping them to data extensions on the guests, right? There's no way to store actual events or push events.
See, this is very good question. So that's a tough question. That's why. So that's what Sitecore will be doing when they launch their recipe for Workato. That's exactly what they're going to do. Where are you going to say this field maps to that extension field in Sitecore in CDP, but
Aggregating and then pushing,
right. But for me, what I'm doing, in my case, I have one second. Come on. So in my case, I store data as a customer data product. So what I do is I aggregate data and only push things that matters to me. So essentially, I do create extension in CDP, but that extension have purpose. It's aggregation. It's not just, I don't want to push all data to Sitecore CDP. I just push whatever value I need. Like, yeah.
You're taking 5 years worth of records and sticking it into CDP.
Right.
You may be looking at 5 years of
Right,
records.
but you push only one value. Yeah, aggregate.
Any other questions? I have a question. It's kind of like what Rob was asking, was that if you have 3 to 5 years of data that is in xDB, right? You then put Personalize on top of your experience to start capturing real data, and then do you stream your old data into the data lake? I'm trying to see, like, when is the time when you can turn off xDB?
Well, that's also a good question. So, really depends. It's all of that is theory, right? This is just kind of art of possible, right? So, I would think that you could turn your xDB as soon as you're comfortable with your personalization routines, and at that time, remember, once you injected your SDK, Engage SDK, you also capturing analytics data. So the idea here is, I think for me, it's like this, right? My leadership, for example, they might be concerned with this new terminology, new process, new approach of composable architecture. So I want to show that this is not like a scary stuff. This is a tool that actually quite easy to use and that has value for our organization. So for me to say, let's just replace xConnect and do it once and go with CDP, it might not fly, right? It's just, they've been doing business their way for a long time. It's not gonna work. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing parallel process, right? We continue to use our xConnect. We introduce this new tool. It does personalization based on information from xDB, xConnect. And at some point in time, I might say, the value I'm getting from Sitecore Personalize is excellent, and then you might stop doing the other things.
So you keep it in xDB until you are ready to turn the switch on for CDP.
Yeah. That's I think that would be my goal, right? Once we're comfortable, once we get what we want from this tool, we're gonna stop xDB and discontinue it, and then have xConnect. And then the next step from there is we might still have rules in our XP, right? Once we can't replace rules with Sitecore Personalize, but we can replace rules when we go to XM Cloud. So my next goal is to say, now that we've done personalization through this composable architecture, let's take our headless site to XM Cloud and let's start using the rules that we have in XP now in the cloud. So, and that would complete this first part of composable transformation. Right now we are in XM, we have Sitecore CDP Personalize, and we are in a good shape. And in theory, I mean, next time, once it's done, I'll update this group how it went.